If Bitcoin breaks below these two levels and drops back below 110, that's where you're probably looking for the next major level of support. And the next major level of support below those two uptrends is the uptrend on the linear chart, which is right here. And you would also be looking at a possible filling of the CME futures gap, which sits at 93,000, right? So somewhere right around here. And then you've also got the flat level support at 100. This is how you have to start building the support architecture if 110 breaks. If 110 breaks, the next support architecture is down here at 100, down to this uptrending level of support. Hence, our prediction, as you can see right over here, we posted on.
Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and welcome back to the content. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the fact that Bitcoin has actually gone through and filled that exact price target that we made 1 month ago today. That's right, the video you just saw was from October the 14th. It went live 4 days after the 1010 crash, and in it, we made the prediction that if Bitcoin is not able to rally above 116,000, then Bitcoin would end up dropping back down to between $94,000 and $100,000. We discussed how $100,000 could hold because it is a mass psychological level of support, but we also discussed how the actual bull market structural support was at $93,000 to $94,000, right there in range to fill the CME futures gap. Today, we need to discuss whether or not the massive crash that we have witnessed on Bitcoin over the last few days is over, and if not, where are we going from here? So without much further ado, let's go ahead and dive right on into it. Bitcoin yesterday managed to fall below $100,000. We actually fell below 100K and back tested the underside of it before moving a lot lower. And as we discussed in that video a month ago, Bitcoin has major structural support right down here at exactly $94,000. That uptrend that supports the entire bull market is right here. And that uptrend is one that we fully anticipated that Bitcoin would come back and revisit. It sits once again right here at $94,000. And as we've been talking about, the intersection between this downtrend and that long-term uptrend is likely the area that you are going to see a bottom on Bitcoin in confluence with the death cross that we see happening right here, and also in confluence with a filling of the CME futures gap. All of those things are happening right now. We have ridden this downtrend right back down to this uptrend. The confluence of those two is tomorrow on Saturday, November the 15th, and we're also hovering just a couple of $1,000s above $94,000 right now. And it's actually interesting, while we were live a few minutes ago, Bitcoin literally came down and hit $94,000 exactly to the penny. You can see right up here, this is going to show you the low, right down here, $94,001 and $94,000 exactly. You can see the low of the candle wick right there. We wicked right down to $94,000. I guess some of the people that had buy orders over on Coinbase had limit buy orders at our price targets. And so Bitcoin has been attempting a bounce here above 94K. But I kind of want to back up and give some structure to this video because there's a few things that we need to discuss. First and foremost, we got this one right. We don't get everything right. I've already told you guys, like, we anticipated that gold would rotate more into Bitcoin than it has so far. I'm surprised more of that hasn't happened. I think that that is going to take longer than we anticipated. We don't get everything right, but when we do get it right, it's fun to celebrate. So thank you to everybody who helped make that prediction possible. Secondly, though, I want to talk about whether or not we're actually done with this correction. Is Bitcoin going to go down and fill the CME futures gap? If so, what does that look like? And third and most importantly, is this correction over? All right, so we've already talked about how we got this prediction right. Again, we know that we're not going to get everything right. We know that everything that we say on this channel is not going to be right, and we are under no illusion that we're going to get everything right, and we're ready in case we are wrong. And I'm happy to admit when we're wrong, but we got this one right, and we're pretty happy about that. Second thing we want to talk about is whether or not we're actually going to fill that CME futures gap. As you will remember, the Bitcoin CME futures gap resides at approximately $91,000, as we talked about in that video that we referenced from October the 14th that you can find on our channel. That CME futures gap sits right here, and it sits right here at the zone between about 91.6 and 92.5. So it's just beneath us. Here's the problem. I would like to say that Bitcoin is going to drop down and fill the CME futures gap. I would love to say that. Here's the problem. It's 4:53 p.m. CME futures are closing very soon. So what I don't really want to see happen is Bitcoin drop down to $90,000, flush out all the longs, because there are a lot of them. I mean, as you can see here, if we look on the 3-month chart on CoinGlass, there are an enormous amount of long liquidations just waiting to get eaten at 89,000. There's a very, very, very real possibility that you could see a massive liquidation event down to $89,000 over the weekend. The worst case scenario would be that Bitcoin drops down, knocks out all those liquidations, happens over the weekend, and we don't fill the CME futures gap, Bitcoin bounces, and all of the price action on the wick that would send us down to like $88,000 to $90,000 to knock out all of those liquidations doesn't show up on the CME futures chart because CME is closed on the weekend. That would really suck. And if that happens, honestly, that might be a bear market catalyst because Bitcoin would then have to fill the CME futures gap again, and breaking down below $90,000 once would be bad enough. Breaking below it twice, that's really not the kind of thing we want to see. So I do think at this point that more likely than not, the CME futures gap is going to get closed. But I would like to think that all the powers that be, all these market makers that have established these cycles that we have been tracking over and over and over again, like the first cycle, the second cycle, the third cycle, I would like to think that the market makers that are intentionally moving markets in these directions, like this, the fact that these markets are this obviously set up is no coincidence. I would like to think that the same market makers that are trying to send us to this low and flush everybody out would not allow Bitcoin to go lower. But who knows? We don't really know. A lot of the time, there are different whales and influences that are pushing the market around, but ultimately, nobody has absolute control over the market. Nobody has absolute control over the narrative. So Bitcoin is, whether you try to control it or not, going to do its own thing to a small degree. What I would like to see happen in some way, and at this point, we're going to have to wait until Monday, I would like to see in some capacity Bitcoin fill the CME futures gap, bottom out, and continue to the upside. It's nice that Bitcoin bottomed out literally to the penny, exactly on our price target, but I would like to see Bitcoin come down here and fill the CME futures gap by dropping down to 91,000. Lord be with you if you have a liquidation down there, because that might be the actual bottom on Bitcoin. But then more likely than not, there's going to be a correction. So are we going to see the CME futures gap fill? Probably. We're this close to it already. The last time that we did not see a CME futures gap get filled was a CME futures gap that was placed down at $20,000. Literally every single other CME futures gap over the course of this entire bull market, except for this little tiny one down here, right over there. I see you. Except for that one over there. This guy. Except for that one right here. I think I can... Except for you, right? Except for that one, every single other one has been touched. Every single other one has been filled. It would not make much sense to me if this one didn't get filled, which means I am forecasting right now that bearishness will continue into next week. I don't know that the bottom is completely done because the CME futures gap is right there and it's probably going to need to get filled. Now, why would it need to get filled? That's a question. Why? Well, let's think about the mechanics of why people trade the way they do. If Bitcoin is just a few dollars, like literally just a few hundred, about $1,000, $1,500 above a CME futures gap, which has like a 90+% chance of getting filled, why would they go long? Remember, people that actually know what they're doing with trading optimize their entries so that they can get ridiculously high risk-to-reward ratios. If you're going to have to put your stop loss below the CME futures gap so you don't get stopped out, and let's say you're longing back up to 100 and you enter right now, your risk-to-reward is like 1. Yuck. But if Bitcoin drops down here to 91 and fills the CME futures gap, your risk-to-reward just became 8. You see? So why would leverage traders who are driving the majority of this market right now, who actually know what they're doing, why would they go long right now? The only thing that could drive Bitcoin to the upside here would either be people that are trying to catch a falling knife and we haven't actually hit the support. The only reason that we went long the other day was because Bitcoin was right above 100. We took a calculated risk that it might bounce off 100. 100 is a very strong level of support. We never put a long just at a random place without a very good reason. There's a very good reason to put a long at 100,000 because you can keep a very tight stop loss. We only lost half a risk factor because of that. But why would you go into a 20, 30, 40, 50x leverage long when Bitcoin may end up needing to bottom 3% to the downside? 3% to the downside times 40x is negative 120%. By the way, that means your liquidation price is above that level. So long traders, I'm talking the big dog long traders, are probably not longing right here. They're probably placing limit longs below $94,000 so that they can properly risk manage by keeping liquidations down below 90. And these people that have very large trades that are moving the market probably also realize that there's a giant liquidity cluster at 89,000 that might just want to get liquidated. And so what happens a lot of the time is when the market is hunting liquidity, what you do is you put your entry right there in the middle of all the liquidation. So while everybody else is getting liquidated, you're getting an entry. So I've got to imagine that people have a bunch of limit orders, limit long orders sitting down here at $89.5 to $90,000, just waiting for us to flush right through the CME futures gap, fill it, get entered, and then go long. That's where I would love to have an entry, is at $90,000. And so Are we going to drop back down to 90? That is a very real possibility that could happen sometime early next week. And it would not necessarily invalidate the supercycle theory. It would not necessarily trigger a bear market. It could just be one last flush out to knock out all of the leverage longs that are over leveraged, fill the semi-futures gap, and that would possibly give enough confidence for a lot of people to start going long because of the narrative shift. If the semi-futures gap is filled, which means that Bitcoin is now ready for launch, and also many of the leverage longs have been knocked out, and a $90,000 or an $89,000 long entry is one that a lot of people in the institutional space are going to want to defend. You've got to understand these institutions, they are not just longing with customer funds. They are also longing with their own funds. If they're going to manage customer funds, that means they have enough information to possibly do their own trading. Many exchanges, many institutions are doing their own trading, right? Even the ones that have control over the space. And so if they have longs down there, they're going to want to protect those. So a long at $90,000 is probably going to have a great deal of institutional protection coming into it from different players that can move the market and manipulate the narrative. Okay, so the question then becomes, because we talked about the call being right, we've talked about how one last flush out could happen. Maybe it doesn't. Honestly, I think that if you don't see the semi-futures gap fill here and you try and rally back up to like 105 or 110, I think that actually means that you're going into a bear market. Like if we got this close to the semi-futures gap and we don't fill it and Bitcoin tries to rally from here, that's probably enough to trigger a bear market because it probably means that we're going to have to come back down here in January. And at that point in time, all the 4-year halving cycle bros have been proven right. Okay, so if this semi-futures gap doesn't get filled, that is bad news. I don't suppose it's bad news bears. It's bad news for the bulls, right? It's bad news for the bears. It's bad news for the bulls, but it's good news for the bears. So I'm looking for the semi-futures gap to get filled. Now, what scenario would send us into a bear market? The scenario that would send us into a bear market is that Bitcoin breaks below this uptrend. Now, some people have asked me a very valid question. Jeb, why do your indicators matter more than the indicators such as Bitcoin breaking below the 50 weekly moving average? Simple. Because if Bitcoin breaks below the 50 simple moving average, there's still this uptrend that can reinstate the bull market. But if Bitcoin breaks below this uptrend, there ain't nothing below it to protect us from going into a bear market. Zilch. Nothing. At that point, if you break through this level, you look at the visible range volume profile, there ain't a lot in between 97 and like 75,000. The vast majority of the trading is taking place right here. You can see the point of control is sitting right here at 96. We're at 95. Bitcoin really needs to hold 90 to 95. It can wick down to 90, but it really needs to hold that zone if it's going to reinstate the bull market. And if it's not going to, fine. But that is something that you really need to see Bitcoin do. You really need to see Bitcoin hold this zone. It can break below 100. It can break below 103 and still be in a bull market, but it cannot break and hold below 90 and still be in a bull market. That is why we put so much emphasis on that. And so under what conditions would we go into a bear market, and what would that bear market look like, and what preparations should be taken? Well, first of all preparations for bear market should already be completed. For anybody who has been watching our channel, you will have heard me say time and time again that although I believe the 4-year halving cycle is dead, bear markets will still happen from time to time. They may just not happen on the 4-year cycle. And you should be prepared for bear markets at all times, because one of the principles that you need to adopt if you want to be a profitable and successful trader is that you need to adopt the principle of worst case scenario preparation. If the worst happens, what are you going to do something about it? Right? This is how people got very, very wealthy in 2008. They were prepared for the worst case scenario. They had cash. And so they bought real estate at 10 cents on the dollar. They bought stocks at 30 cents on the dollar. And that was where true wealth came from, because they had really, really, really good entries. The only way you build really, really, really good entries is if you hold off and you don't buy the tops and you hold on to cash so you can buy the bottom. So if you're not prepared for a bear market, you need to be. Okay, but again, under what conditions would we become bears? I would become a bear and be someone who is calling for a bear market in 2026 if Bitcoin cannot hold above $90,000. If we confidently break, in other words, below this uptrend, if Bitcoin confidently breaks below this uptrend, which has not happened yet, but if it does, if we break this uptrend, I am officially a bear, and I would be expecting Bitcoin to drop to between $57,000 to $75,000. Now, there's a bunch of different reasons for that, but one of the most obvious reasons for that is because it is a zone between the previous all-time high and this all-time high. And it also is a zone that is bottoming out down around 0.618 on the Fibonacci extension for the whole bull market. So it's basically a zone that exists between 0.618 Fibonacci and this all-time high. And then you also have the other all-time highs right here in the middle of that. So that is where I would expect Bitcoin to go in a bear market, is somewhere between $57,000 to $75,000. Although our family is personally prepared for a bear market as low as 30. This is what I've talked about extensively when I discuss, are you prepared for a bear market? Our family is prepared. It wouldn't be that comfortable, but we are prepared to be safe in the event of a bear market down to $30,000. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, but we want to be prepared for the worst so that we can sleep at night. It's a valuable thing, being able to sleep at night. No? Exactly. So we are prepared for a bear market down to $30,000, although I don't actually think that Bitcoin would need to go that low. Again, the way that we will confirm that is that if Bitcoin was not able to hold above this uptrending level of support, we'll go ahead and remove the Fibonacci to make it look a little bit easier to see. If Bitcoin is not able to hold above this uptrending level of support, that is where we would be anticipating a bear market down to $57,000 to $75,000. That would probably bottom out sometime early on next year. On the other hand, if Bitcoin does bottom here, and this is the bottom, I anticipate in the first half of next year that Bitcoin will rally up to $150,000. This is the decision. Up or down. Bitcoin's got to pick, and it's going to pick sometime before the end of this month. Sometime before the end of this month, Bitcoin is going to pick a direction that will likely result in either $50-something thousand Bitcoin by middle of next year or $150-something thousand Bitcoin by the end of next year. I am still tentatively leaning in the bullish direction, but of course, if Bitcoin starts making lower lows here, then that ends up getting invalidated. So I would love to hear your opinions on that in the comment section down below. Where do you think Bitcoin is going? What preparations have you made for a bear market, even if you don't believe that one is coming because you are trying to be responsible? What are your predictions for 2026? I've been very outspoken that I believe 2026 is going to be a bullish year, and I will have all kinds of egg on my face if I'm wrong, and that is totally fine because I will be buying the dip to the moon and back next year if we do go into a bear market, because I want a certain amount of Bitcoin. And frankly, if we go into a bear market, it's easier to acquire. So I'm not really going to be too peeved if we do go into a bear market, although I would have been wrong on those predictions. So far, we've been pretty accurate. We called for $130,000 Bitcoin earlier this year. We hit 126.2, not quite 130, but we got pretty close. We then called for 94. Just a few minutes ago, we hit $94,000 to the penny. And at this point in time, I am calling for a bullish 2026, although Bitcoin is going to take a few weeks, probably a few months to get away from this correction that is just built in the same way that it took a few weeks to months to really start moving again in these last markets. And so overall, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin in the very long term. I'm also very bullish on Bitcoin even in the short term, but of course, it's going to take time to see what plays out. So I'd love all of your opinions in the comment section. Where is Bitcoin going from here? We have now fulfilled the entirety of our price target of $94,000 to $100,000. I would love to hear your opinions. Do we go lower from here? Do we go higher from here? At this point, this is something that I do when we make predictions and they come true, which they normally do. Once they've come true or once they've been invalidated, I take a few days to kind of analyze and think before I go and make another one, because I don't like to. These big swing predictions that we make, such as 94 to 100K Bitcoin, are ones that I put a lot of thought into because I kind of base all of the rest of our analysis off of them. So I'm going to take a few days just to do some really deep analysis and think about where I think we're going next. But right now, what I can tell you is that whether or not Bitcoin holds this 90 to 95K zone is going to be the deciding factor as to whether or not Bitcoin is able to rally higher from here. But guys, something I do want to encourage you to do is in your preparation for bear market, I want you to understand that you can make just as much, if not even more money in a bear market than you can in a bull market. And the way you can do that is by trading. If you guys have not already, I highly encourage you to sign up for Femex. I'm going to tell you why. When you sign up for Femex, not only are you going to be getting access to a phenomenal cryptocurrency exchange, you're also going to be getting access to a free trading course that we are working on in partnership with Femex. So when you deposit $100 on Femex, you're going to get access to this trading course that we're working on, and you will be getting access to that very soon. So if you have not already, make sure to sign up for Femex with the link in the description box down below. Deposit $100 and start trading. And then here in a few weeks, when this trading course is done, we're going to release this to you, and you are going to be able to learn more about how to make profitable trades and properly risk manage so that you can hold on to your wealth, and hopefully even grow it in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency markets. I hope you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to drop a like, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned for more content. Make sure to follow us over on X at CryptoJeb. That's where we post all of our predictions. We've been posting predictions about this drop for the last month over there. We post 20 to 30 times a day over there. I'm very active on X. Make sure to follow us over there. I love you so much. And before I go, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.